week we're going to talk all about sources. And a source is kind of where we get our information from. So I want you to think about a story from when you were a baby or a toddler. How do you know about that story? Can you actually remember you being a baby? Usually we remember stories when we're babies because someone told us or we saw a picture of us doing something. This is one way that we learn about the past. Primary sources teach us about the past. Primary sources come from the people who experienced the events in history. They were actually there to see them happen. So if somebody is actually there and sees an event happen, we consider them a primary source. So what are some types of primary sources? So primary sources can be pictures. Easy. They can be diaries. Now a diary is kind of like a journal. People write down things that happen. They might keep a daily journal or a daily diary. And they might just explain how their day went. And that is a primary source because it's coming from the person who was actually there to see the events happen. They can be books or letters. They could be maps or objects. So primary sources are objects that you yourself have been there to see happen. For instance, I was at my wedding, so I could tell a story about the day of my wedding and how it was beautiful. It was sunshiny. We had lots of guests. We had really good food. It was delicious, but I was there, so I can talk about that. I'm a primary source because I saw it with my own eyeballs. Now, if you didn't see it and you didn't hear it and somebody is telling you about it, then we call those secondary sources. A secondary source is made after an event has happened, and secondary sources are made by people who were not there when the event happened. Let's go through some examples of secondary sources. So a secondary source could be a magazine or a newspaper. We're reading our Studies Weekly right now. That is considered a secondary source. We weren't there to see these things happen, but we can read about them and know that they happened. Now, when we're reading things, whether it is a magazine or a newspaper or a book or a story, we need to understand the difference between fact and fiction. Now, sources can be facts if they're true and they're real and they actually happen. We call those facts. Now, fiction means it's made up. It's not real. It didn't happen. It can't happen. So sometimes, especially in books, we'll see facts versus fiction. So if I'm looking around our classroom, I could see that Cole, maybe he's wearing a yellow shirt. That's a fact because we're looking at him and we can see that he's wearing a yellow shirt. If I say I'm looking around our classroom and I see a giant unicorn, you're going to know that that is a fiction because unicorns do not actually exist. They are fiction. So we could use facts telling truth, things that are true and really happen. Maybe the color of your eyes, somebody's wearing glasses or no glasses, the color of your clothing, maybe how tall you are, maybe how many brothers and sisters you have. Those are facts. Those are things we can actually check and prove that they are true. And then fiction are things that are made up stories. They're usually for entertaining people. So let's do a little example here of fact versus fiction. So I'm going to make myself bigger. Awesome. Let's take a look at some books. Now, we can check. Oh, let me move myself over. Oh, a little smaller. We can know. How do we know if we're looking at a book and it is fact or fiction? So let's talk about that. Let me go bigger now. All right, so we can tell by looking at a book if it's fact or fiction, number one, by reading the title. The title of this story is Old MacDino Had a Farm. Do you think this is a true story? It really actually happens? Probably not, because a dinosaur cannot have a farm. Now, we can also look at the pictures on the cover of the story. If I look at those pictures, are those something you would expect to see outside at your neighbor's house? Probably not. So I'm again going to think that this is not a factual story. This is a made up story or fiction. And then the third way we can tell if something is fact or not is if it's trying to teach you something or it has true facts in it. You're learning about something. So in this story, Old MacDino Had a Farm, I think it's probably just for entertainment, for us to enjoy. So this type of story is going to be a fictional story. Now let's check out this one. Let's look at our title first. The title of this story is called Fantastic Frogs. So based on my title, frogs can be fantastic. I might say that's a true story. Let's look at our picture on our cover. Does that look true? Well, it certainly looks like a real picture to me. So this one also makes me wonder if it's true. And if I look inside, let's find some pictures. If I look inside, there are some actual pictures and it's got some information in there. And it tells me about frogs. So this story is teaching me about frogs. This is a fact, a book that is true or real. So I would say this book is factual. What about this one? Do you think this story is fact or fiction? Now this one says surprising swimmers, and there's a picture of an elephant on the front. Now I might not know that elephants can swim, so I might want to find out more information. So I can flip through and find out, oh look, there's a cat, and that cat is swimming. Not all cats like to. But this story is teaching us about different animals that can swim, which is why it's called Surprising Swimmers, because we might not expect it to be true, but it actually is. So this story is fact. How about this one? This one's called Bruce's Big Move. Do you think this is going to be a fact book or a fiction book? Well, Bruce's Big Move, just looking at the title, that could be true. But then when I look at the picture, I see a bear driving a motorcycle. Now, are you going to see a bear driving a motorcycle down the street? Probably not. So this story is a made-up fiction story meant for entertaining us, to keep us entertained. So we can tell, again, let's go back to, let me minimize me again. We can go back to a story. We can look at the story, look at the title, look at the pictures, and then wonder, is the book telling a story or teaching you something new? And if it is, then we can say that story or that book is fact. And if it's made up, if it looks fake, if it looks like it's for entertaining you, that is a fiction story. Awesome. So then next up, let's talk about news. So the news can be a source. The news is a source of information. It tells us about events that are happening right now. And so we can watch the news on TV. We could read a newspaper, although a newspaper, usually by the time they print it, it's about things that have already happened. So the news on TV or on your phones or on our computers, those are going to be things that are happening right now. And so that can be a really great source of information because it's happening right now. So boys and girls, for your assignment today, you're going to have a page that looks similar to this in Seesaw, and it wants you to take a look at a book and cut out the parts of the book. You're not going to need to cut it out. I will have this formatted for you in Seesaw. It wants you to put them in the correct place on the book. So you're going to move them. You'll use your move tool at the bottom, click on the word and drag it. This first word is cover. So where's the cover of our book? How about the spine? The next word says title. Then it says author, picture, illustrator. So I want you to think about those things that we've talked about before in our sources and in our stories that we read every day. And I want you to label this book with those 6 words: cover, spine, title, author, picture, illustrator. You may need your grown-up to help you with this one, to help you read the words, but I know that you know where those words should go. So feel free to label those in your Seesaw activity today. And we will continue our discussion about primary, secondary sources, fact and fiction over the course of this week.